6.5 million years ago, when darkness fell upon the African savanna, death walked on 4 legs. Tonight, I'll tell you about the night that changed everything for one tribe. The night when survival meant more than finding food or shelter. It meant outsmarting creatures that had ruled these lands for millennia. In the fading light of dusk, as shadows grew longer and more menacing, a female Homo habilis named Kira would discover that sometimes the hunters become the hunted. And when an entire tribe faces extinction, only the darkest strategies can save them from a fate worse than death. What you're about to hear is a story of primal terror, where intelligence battled raw savagery, and where one decision would determine whether humanity's ancestors lived to see another dawn. The acrid smell of smoke still lingered in the air as Kira, a female Homo habilis with weathered hands and sharp, calculating eyes, crouched behind the massive baobab tree. Her tribe had been tracking the herd of antelope for 3 days, but something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The savanna stretched endlessly before her, painted in shades of amber and rust under the dying sun. But where there should have been the familiar sounds of her people preparing for the evening hunt, there was only an unnatural silence. A silence that made her primitive heart race with ancestral fear. "Where are they?" she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. Kira's nostrils flared as she caught a metallic scent carried by the wind. Blood. Fresh blood. But not from their prey. This was different, warmer, more familiar. Human blood. Her calloused fingers tightened around the crude stone axe she had crafted just that morning. The weight felt reassuring, but she knew it would be useless against what might be coming. She had seen the tracks earlier, massive paw prints that dwarfed even the largest lions, with claw marks that gouged deep into the hardened earth. The saber-toothed cats had returned to their territory. Kira's breathing became shallow as memories flooded back. 3 seasons ago, her birth tribe had been decimated by a pack of these ancient predators. She had been one of only 5 survivors, rescued by the group she now called family. But the nightmares never left her. The sound of bones crushing. The screams that echoed through the darkness. Suddenly, a twig snapped behind her. She spun around, axe raised, only to see Jorak, her mate, emerging from the tall grass. His usually confident demeanor was replaced by something she had rarely seen in him. Raw terror. His chest heaved as he struggled to catch his breath, and his eyes darted constantly to the shadows around them. "Kira," he gasped, grabbing her arm with trembling fingers. "They're all gone." "What do you mean gone?" she demanded, though her voice betrayed her growing panic. "The camp... there's nothing left. Grun and the hunting party never returned. Myra and the children... His voice broke. "I found pieces of Thok's spear, covered in blood, but no bodies. They took them, Kira. They took them all." The implications hit her like a physical blow. Saber-toothed cats didn't just kill for food. They were strategic hunters, eliminating entire groups to claim territory. And now, her adopted tribe was being systematically wiped out. "How many?" she whispered. "At least 3, maybe more." I saw their eyes reflecting firelight near the old watering hole. "They're hunting in a pack, which means... double quotes. He didn't need to finish. Pack hunters meant coordinated attacks. It meant they were being hunted by creatures with intelligence that nearly matched their own. Kira felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She had survived this before. She knew their patterns, their weaknesses. But this time, she wasn't a helpless child hiding in the rocks. "The caves," she said suddenly. "The limestone caves near the red rocks. That's where they'll take the survivors. Saber-tooth like to keep their prey alive... fresh." Jorak's eyes widened with a mixture of hope and horror. "You think some of them are still alive? I know they are. But not for long." She stood up, her primitive mind already formulating a plan that would have seemed impossible to any other creature on Earth. These cats think they're the apex predators. Tonight, we're gonna teach them they're wrong." As if summoned by her words, a bone-chilling roar echoed across the savannah, closer than before, much closer. In the fading light, two golden eyes appeared between the trees, watching them with predatory intelligence. The hunt had begun. The limestone caves loomed ahead like the gaping maw of some primordial beast, their entrance shrouded in shadow and mystery. Kira pressed herself against the cold rock face, feeling the moisture seep through her rough hide clothing. The familiar scent of damp earth and ancient stone filled her nostrils, but underneath, it lurked something far more sinister. "I can smell them," she whispered to Jorak, who crouched beside her, his primitive spear trembling in his grip. "The cats. And our people." The sounds emanating from deep within the cave system were nightmare fuel, a mixture of low, rumbling purrs and something else that made her blood run cold. Whimpering. Human whimpering. Jorak's jaw clenched. "Lena ... That's Lena's voice. She's still alive." Kira nodded grimly. Lena was barely more than a child, only having seen 14 seasons. If she was alive, others might be too, but time was running out. Saber-toothed cats preferred their meat fresh, but they also enjoyed the psychological torture of keeping their prey alive and terrified. "Listen to me carefully," Kira breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. "These caves have 3 main chambers. The cats will have our people in the deepest one. It's easier to guard, and the acoustics amplify fear. But there's a secondary passage that connects to the main chamber. I used it as a child." "How do you know this place so well?" Her eyes grew distant, remembering. "This is where I hid when my birth tribe was slaughtered. I spent 7 days in these caves, listening to those monsters feast on my family's remains. I memorized every tunnel, every dead end, every echo." Thunder crashed overhead, and rain began to patter against the cave entrance. The storm would provide cover for their approach, but it would also make the already treacherous cave floors even more dangerous. They slipped inside, moving with the careful precision of creatures who understood that one misplaced step meant death. The cave walls pressed in around them, slick with moisture and decorated with primitive paintings left by previous inhabitants, warnings of the dangers that lurked in these depths. As they descended deeper, the sounds became clearer. The rhythmic patting of massive paws, the occasional snap of bones. And yes, definitely human voices, weak, terrified, but alive. There, Kira pointed to a narrow crack in the cave wall, barely wide enough for a human to squeeze through. "That passage leads directly to the main chamber. But first, we need to see what we're dealing with." She pressed her eye to a natural fissure in the rock and immediately wished she hadn't. The main chamber was vast, illuminated by shafts of lightning that penetrated through cracks in the ceiling. 3 massive saber-toothed cats prowled the space like living nightmares, their amber eyes glowing in the intermittent light. Their fangs, each as long as a human forearm, dripped with saliva as they circled their captives. 5 members of their tribe huddled together in the center of the chamber. Lena, Old Brock, Mira with her infant son, and twin brothers Kesh and Dern. They were wounded, but alive, their eyes wide with terror as they watched their captors pace around them. But it was what lay scattered around the chamber's edges that made Kira's primitive heart fill with rage. Bones. Fresh bones picked clean of meat. The remains of Thok Grun, and at least 3 others she couldn't identify. "We can't fight them directly," she whispered to Jorak. 3 saber-tooths would tear us apart in seconds. "But I have a plan. These cats are intelligent, yes, but they think like predators. They don't expect their prey to become predators." She pointed to the chamber ceiling. "See those loose rocks? Years of water erosion have weakened the limestone. If we can create the right kind of vibration, the right frequency of sound." "You want to collapse the ceiling?" Jorak's eyes widened. "That could kill our people too." Not the whole ceiling. Just that section there, where the largest cat keeps standing. If we time it right, we can trap or injure the alpha male. The other two will be confused, maybe even flee. It's our only chance. As if sensing their presence, the largest saber-tooth suddenly raised its massive head and sniffed the air. Its intelligent eyes scanned the chamber walls, searching for the source of the unfamiliar scent. Kira felt her blood freeze as those predatory eyes seemed to look directly at their hiding spot. "It knows we're here," she breathed. The great cat let out a roar that shook the very foundations of the cave, causing loose pebbles to rain down from above. In response, the captives screamed and huddled closer together, while the other two cats moved to flank the chamber entrance. They were no longer the hunters. They had become the hunted, and their presence had just triggered something far worse than a simple feeding frenzy. The massive alpha saber-tooth's roar still echoed through the cavern as Kira realized the terrifying truth. These weren't ordinary predators operating on instinct alone. They were strategizing. The way the two smaller cats positioned themselves at the chamber's entrance, the deliberate pacing of the alpha as it searched for intruders, the almost casual way they ignored their captives while focusing on the new threat. "They're not just hunting," she whispered to Jorik, her voice tight with growing understanding. "They're planning." Old Brock, the tribe's eldest member and keeper of ancient knowledge, lifted his weathered head from where he cowered with the others. Even in his terror, his sharp eyes caught sight of movement in the shadows near the fissure where Kira and Jorik hid. "Kira," he called out in the barest whisper, hoping his voice wouldn't carry to the cats. "Is that you, child?" The alpha's ears twitched at the sound, and its massive head swiveled toward the captives. With deliberate slowness, it approached old Brock, its fangs gleaming whitely in the intermittent lightning. The old man's body trembled, but his eyes remained fixed on the shadows where he hoped salvation lurked. "They know we're here," Jorik breathed, his knuckles wide as he gripped his spear. "We have to act now, or—" "Wait," Kira interrupted, studying the scene with the analytical mind that had kept her alive when her birth tribe perished. "Look at their positioning. The alpha is using Brock as bait. It knows we care about our people, and it's counting on that emotional attachment to draw us out." The largest saber-tooth placed one massive paw on either side of old Brock, who closed his eyes and began mumbling what might have been prayers to the spirits of the hunt. The cat's intelligent amber eyes never left the shadows where it suspected the intruders were hiding. This is psychological warfare, Kira realized with growing horror. They're not just apex predators, they're apex manipulators. But then something unexpected happened. Young Lena, barely more than a child, slowly rose to her feet despite her injured leg. Her voice, though trembling with fear, carried a note of defiant determination that seemed to echo through the chamber. "Kira," she called out, loud enough for the cats to hear. "I know you're there. I can smell your scent. But don't come for us. Don't let them trap you too." The alpha saber-tooth's head snapped toward Lena with predatory interest, clearly surprised by this act of defiance from what it considered mere prey. But Lena continued speaking, her words growing stronger with each syllable. "These beasts think they understand fear, but they don't understand courage. They don't understand sacrifice." She looked directly at the largest cat, meeting its gaze with a boldness that seemed impossible given her circumstances. "You killed Thok, you killed Grun, but you made one mistake. You left survivors who remember your patterns." The alpha tilted its massive head, almost as if it were listening to her words and processing their meaning. The intelligence in those amber eyes was unmistakable and terrifying. Kira felt her heart racing as she realized what Lena was doing. The girl was buying them time, drawing the cat's attention while simultaneously sending a coded message. Lena had been present during the attack on Kira's birth tribe 3 seasons ago. She knew the stories, knew the patterns. "She's telling us something," Kira breathed. The survivors who remember your patterns. She pressed her face closer to the fissure, studying the scene with new eyes. That's when she saw it. The positioning of the captives wasn't random. Old Brock near the eastern wall, Myra with her infant by the natural stone pillar, the twin brothers pressed against the western edge. They had arranged themselves in a specific pattern, one that Kira had described to them years ago when recounting her survival story. "They're showing us the weak points," she whispered urgently to Jorik. "The places where the limestone is most fractured. Lena's giving us a map." But their whispered conversation hadn't gone unnoticed. The Alpha suddenly let out a different kind of vocalization, not a roar, but a series of complex grunts and growls that the other two cats responded to immediately. They began moving in a coordinated pattern that chilled Kira to her bones. One cat remained guarding the captives. The second moved to block the main entrance completely. And the Alpha began stalking directly toward their hiding spot, its massive form moving with deadly grace through the shadows. "It's calling them by name," Jorik whispered in horror. "Listen to the different sounds it's making. It's giving specific instructions to each cat." Kira's blood ran cold as she realized he was right. These saber-toothed cats had developed a complex communication system. They were operating as a coordinated unit with tactical awareness that rivaled their own tribal hunting strategies. The Alpha's massive shadow fell across their hiding spot as it approached the fissure. In moments, those terrible fangs would be inches from their faces. But Kira had spent years studying predator behavior, and she had noticed something crucial. Something that might give them the slightest advantage in what seemed like an impossible situation. The Alpha was limping slightly on its left rear paw. An old injury, probably from a previous battle with a rival predator. It was compensating well, but that tiny weakness might be exploitable if they could survive the next 60 seconds. The great cat's breathing was now audible just outside their shelter, and the scent of its predatory musk filled their nostrils like the promise of death itself. The Alpha's breathing was so close now that Kira could feel the humid warmth of its breath seeping through the crack in the limestone. Every muscle in her primitive body was coiled like a spring, ready to explode into action, but she forced herself to remain perfectly still. The slightest movement would trigger an attack that would end in their immediate death. Through the fissure, she could see one massive amber eye peering in, scanning the shadows where they hid. The intelligence behind that gaze was unmistakable. This creature was analyzing, calculating, planning its next move with the cold precision of a master strategist. Suddenly, the eye disappeared. Kira's heart hammered against her ribs as she realized what was happening. The Alpha wasn't giving up. It was repositioning, looking for another way to reach them. These limestone caves had been carved by millions of years of water flow, creating a maze of interconnected passages. The saber-tooth was searching for an alternate route to their hiding spot. "It knows," she breathed to Jorik. "It knows exactly where we are, and it's hunting us like we would hunt prey." From the main chamber, old Brack's voice rose in what sounded like a death chant, but Kira's trained ear caught the subtle variations in his tone. He was still providing intelligence, using the ancient storytelling rhythms to disguise tactical information. "The great hunter of the eastern winds," he intoned, "knows the secrets of the crumbling stone. When the earth shakes with the voice of the storm god, the weak places reveal themselves." Kira's eyes widened with understanding. Brock was telling them about sound amplification, how certain frequencies could cause resonance in the limestone's natural fracture points. But more importantly, he was indicating that their plan to collapse part of the ceiling was still viable. A new sound echoed through the caves, the scraping of massive claws against stone, coming from a passage to their left. The Alpha had found a way around. "Move!" Kira hissed, grabbing Jorik's arm. "Now!" They squeezed through the narrow passage that led to the main chamber, their rough clothing catching on the jagged limestone edges. Behind them, They could hear the Alpha forcing its massive bulk through the same passage, snarling with frustration as it struggled with the tight confines. They emerged into the main chamber just as lightning illuminated the scene in stark detail. The two other saber-tooths immediately focused on them with predatory intensity, their muscles coiling for attack. But Kira was already moving, driven by a plan born from desperation and refined by intelligence. "Myra!" she shouted to the woman clutching her infant. "The stone pillar." Now, without hesitation, Mira understood and moved, pressing herself and her child against the natural limestone column that rose from the chamber floor to the fractured ceiling above. The other captives, trained by years of coordinated hunting and survival, immediately followed her lead. The two smaller saber-tooths, confused by this sudden movement, hesitated for a crucial moment. That hesitation gave Kira the opening she needed. She let out a vocalization unlike anything a human had ever produced, a deep, resonant howl that seemed to come from the very depths of the earth. The sound bounced off the chamber walls, creating harmonics that made the limestone itself vibrate. Jorak, understanding immediately, added his voice to hers. Then old Brock, then the twins, then even young Lena. The sound built upon itself, layer after layer of human voices, creating a frequency that found the natural resonance point of the weakened limestone ceiling. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Dust began to rain from above as the ceiling started to vibrate. The saber-tooths, despite their intelligence, had never encountered anything like this. They backed away from the humans, confusion replacing predatory confidence in their amber eyes. But the Alpha, just now emerging from the narrow passage with scratches across its massive shoulders, seemed to understand what was happening. It let out a roar of fury and charged directly at Kira, its injured paw forgotten in its rage. "Keep singing!" Kira screamed, even as she rolled to avoid the Alpha's slashing claws. "Don't stop!" The ceiling continued to shake, larger chunks of limestone now falling like primitive hail. One piece struck the Alpha's shoulder, causing it to stumble slightly, but its focus remained locked on Kira with deadly intensity. That's when young Lena did something that defied every survival instinct. Instead of cowering with the others, she limped directly toward the largest section of fractured ceiling and added her voice to the resonant frequency, but with a crucial difference. She began striking the limestone pillar with a broken piece of bone, creating percussion that amplified the sound waves exponentially. The effect was like nothing any creature in that chamber had ever experienced. The ceiling didn't just crack, it sang. The limestone itself became a massive resonating instrument, amplifying their voices into something that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. One of the smaller saber-tooths, terror overriding its predatory instincts, bolted for the chamber entrance. The second followed moments later, their departure marked by the sound of claws scrambling against stone as they fled into the storm. But the Alpha stood its ground, even as chunks of ceiling began falling around it. Its intelligent eyes locked with Kira's, and in that moment, she realized this wasn't just about territory or food anymore. This had become personal. The great cat gathered itself for what would clearly be its final, decisive attack. Win or lose, this confrontation would end in the next few seconds. And that's when the largest section of ceiling, directly above where the Alpha stood, began to crack with sounds like breaking thunder. Time seemed suspended as the massive limestone slab hung above the Alpha saber-tooth, held in place by nothing more than hairline fractures and the will of ancient stone. Kira could see death approaching from two directions, a ceiling that was about to collapse, and the great cat that was coiling for its final killing leap. In that crystalline moment of absolute terror, her mind made calculations with the cold precision of a master tactician. The Alpha's injured paw would make it favor its right side when it jumped. The falling stone would take approximately 3 heartbeats to complete its descent. She had one chance, one perfect moment, to survive. Jorak! She screamed, her voice cutting through the chaos. The torch! Without hesitation, her mate grabbed the smoldering branch they had used to navigate the caves and hurled it directly at the alpha's face. The cat instinctively recoiled from the fire, its timing disrupted just enough to throw off its calculated attack. Kira dove to her left, rolling desperately toward the chamber wall as the great cat launched itself through the air where she had been standing just moments before. The alpha's massive form passed directly beneath the cracking ceiling slab. The limestone gave way with a sound like the world splitting open. Dust and debris exploded through the chamber as tons of ancient stone crashed down. The alpha's roar of rage transformed into something else entirely, a sound of pain and surprise that seemed to shake the very air. When the dust began to settle, illuminated by the intermittent lightning, the scene revealed itself like something from a nightmare. The great saber-tooth was pinned beneath a massive chunk of limestone, its rear legs trapped but its front claws still free and slashing at the air with deadly fury. "It's not dead," old Brock whispered, his voice hoarse from the prolonged vocalization. "Wounded, trapped, but not dead." The alpha's amber eyes, now burning with pain-fueled rage, locked onto Kira. Even pinned and injured, the intelligence behind those eyes was calculating, planning. If it could work itself free, its vengeance would be terrible. But Kira had learned something crucial during this encounter. The saber-tooth's greatest strength, their intelligence, was also a potential weakness. Unlike pure instinct-driven predators, they could be reasoned with, manipulated, even negotiated with. She approached the trapped alpha slowly, her stone axe held ready but not raised in immediate threat. The great cat's eyes tracked her movement, and its struggles against the pinning stone intensified. "You're not stupid," she said quietly, speaking to the alpha as if it were a rival tribe leader. "You understand loss. You understand that your pack is broken, your territory challenged." The saber-tooth's struggles slowed slightly, and its head tilted in a way that suggested it was actually listening to her words. "Your cubs will starve without you," Kira continued, taking another careful step closer. "Your bloodline will end, but it doesn't have to." Jorak watched in amazement as his mate engaged in what appeared to be diplomatic negotiations with a creature that had just tried to kill them all. But he had learned to trust Kira's understanding of predator psychology. "We can help each other," she said, now close enough that the trapped cat could have slashed her throat if its front legs were just a little longer. "You leave our territory. Take your pack to the southern hunting grounds where the buffalo herds winter. In return, we help you get free." The alpha's breathing changed slightly, becoming less ragged with panic and more controlled. Its intelligent eyes studied Kira's face, searching for deception. "How do we know it won't attack us the moment it's free?" whispered Myra, clutching her infant tighter. "Because," Kira replied without taking her eyes off the great cat, "it's smart enough to know that we could have killed it while it was trapped. Instead, we chose to talk. That means something to an intelligent predator." She slowly reached down and picked up a sharp piece of limestone, then began working at the edge of the stone slab that pinned the alpha's legs. The cat watched her efforts with something that might have been amazement. "Lena," Kira called. "Come help me," but slowly. The young girl limped forward, her fear still evident but controlled by curiosity about this unprecedented interaction between human and apex predator. Together, they began the delicate work of creating leverage points around the stone slab. The alpha remained still during this process, though its eyes never stopped tracking their movements. "Why are you doing this?" Lena whispered as they worked. "After what it did to Thok and Grun?" Kira paused in her efforts, looking directly into the alpha's amber eyes. "Because survival isn't just about winning battles. Sometimes it's about choosing which battles not to fight." After what seemed like hours, but was probably only minutes, they managed to shift the limestone slab enough for the great cat to work its legs free. The alpha rose slowly, testing its injured limbs, its massive form still imposing despite its wounds. For a moment that lasted an eternity, predator and prey faced each other in the flickering light of the storm. The saber-tooth could easily kill several of them before they could escape. The humans were exhausted, their weapons crude compared to those terrible fangs and claws. But the alpha simply studied them for a long moment, then let out a series of complex vocalizations that echoed through the chamber. From somewhere in the storm outside, answering calls returned. The great cat limped toward the chamber entrance, pausing once to look back at Kira. In that glance, she saw something that would haunt her dreams for the rest of her life. Not malevolence or gratitude, but acknowledgement. Recognition between two apex intelligences. Then it was gone, vanishing into the storm with its pack. The humans stood in the damaged chamber, surrounded by the debris of their desperate gambit, hardly believing they were still alive. 3 days had passed since the confrontation in the limestone caves, but the storm still raged across the African savanna. Kira stood at the entrance of a new shelter her tribe had constructed in the red rock cliffs, watching sheets of rain transform the landscape into something alien and primordial. The tribe had lost 7 members to the saber-tooth's initial attack, more than a third of their number. Thok and Grun would never again share stories around the evening fire. The twins Cash and Dern bore claw marks that would scar them for life, constant reminders of how close they had all come to extinction. But they had survived. More than that, they had evolved. The others think you're touched by spirits, old Brack said, approaching with his careful, aged gait. His hands trembled slightly. Whether from his advanced years or the trauma of their recent experience, Kira couldn't tell. They say no human has ever spoken with the great cats and lived. Kira continued staring out at the storm, her mind processing the implications of what had occurred. Maybe they're right. Maybe something has changed in us. Or maybe it was always there, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Young Lena limped up beside them, her wounded leg healing but still causing her obvious discomfort. Despite her injury, there was something different about her now, a confidence, a maturity that hadn't existed before their ordeal. "I've been thinking about what happened in the caves," she said, her voice carrying a thoughtful quality that seemed older than her 14 seasons. The way we all knew what to do without being told. The way our voices worked together to shake the stone itself. It wasn't just luck, Kira agreed. We were operating as something more than individual hunters trying to survive. We were thinking as a group mind, each person's intelligence contributing to a larger strategy. Jorak joined their small group, carrying a freshly crafted spear with an improved stone point. His weapon-making had become more sophisticated since their encounter with the saber-tooths, sharper angles, better balance, more efficient killing potential.